It is a vigilante attack against the monetary system by the people. Hey guys, Raf here from the Endgame Investor, and in my last video, I talked about the boom-bust cycle, the Austrian business cycle, coming out into the flesh and actually burning down properties. If the inflationary cycle lasts long enough, it leaks out of assets and goes into real people, where inflated people with no talent and no productive capacity go into essential services, and they are in charge of the fire department because they're being paid off by inflationary dollars, and then cities burn down. In this video, I wanted to talk about how the end game, how the crack up boom, how hyperinflation is actually an instance of vigilante justice against an unjust monetary system that undermines law and order. We just had news of Biden, Yimach Shemo, which means may his name be erased in Hebrew, issuing preemptive full pardons to criminals. And I can call them criminals because according to the Supreme Court, the acceptance of a pardon is admission of guilt. So therefore, these people are criminals. If we are to think of what the end game is, the inflationary system is an insidious system that legalizes theft by the class that prints the money, which is the political class and its central bank. That system enables systemic theft and bases society on that theft, and it slowly, insidiously undermines the very rule of law. It comes slowly at first, but it lasts decades and decades and decades, and then by the end of it, people are killing each other. The only way to stop inflation is hyperinflation, which if you think about what that is, it is a vigilante attack against the monetary system by the people. What happens is that they no longer accept the money, and their desire to hold any cash balance falls to zero. Gold in that currency terms goes to infinity, and you need raw money in order to enact any transaction, and no longer do the derivatives at all work. But it is not a legal battle. Hyperinflation is, in its essence, a vigilante attack on an unjust monetary system. In the same way, preemptive pardons undermine the very rule of law by enabling criminals to get away systematically with anything they may want to do as long as their political lackeys are in power. Now, in Jewish law, there is a principle called Boel Aramis Kanain Poginbo, which is translated as he who has sexual relations with an idolatrous woman in public, zealots can go and kill that person without any trial. This action is not encouraged. In fact, it could be said that it is discouraged, but it is still a legal principle. Now, this is a very dangerous principle, but why is it necessary for a legal system to have a tradition of vigilantism in certain circumstances? Well, if you're going to have the rule of law itself used to undermine the very rule of law that it is trying to uphold, there are reasons for pardons. Pardons are legitimate, but if they're being used to upend the entire rule of law, well, then, if the goal is to upend the entire rule of law, the only way to counteract that is to upend the entire rule of law. Now, this is not a prescription.
And the only prescription is more cowbell.
I'm not recommending that anybody kill anybody. What I'm saying is that it is on par with hyperinflation. Hyperinflation is the inevitable end of all inflationary systems. It always ends in a vigilante attack upon the monetary system that itself is being used to upend the rule of law and property rights by allowing insidious theft to go on for decades. And so when the Jewish legal system allows for vigilantism in certain circumstances, it's not a condoning of this action. It's not a recommendation. I believe it's merely a description that when the entire foundation of the legal system is attempting to be upended by, in this case, someone publicly having sexual relations with an idolatrous woman as part of an idol-worshiping ceremony, what that act is attempting to do is upend the entire Jewish legal system. So too, since the only possible end of any inflationary system is vigilante justice against that currency, which is hyperinflation, which is when nobody wants to hold that currency for any amount of time, That is not a recommendation, it is only an inevitability. When you have a society where these types of pardons are issued, inevitably it leads to vigilante justice. It can be summed up in one sentence. If you attempt to upend the rule of law will be upended and you will be subject to the consequences as an inevitable rule of nature. Just as with fires, if you try to keep the dead brush on the forest floor without cleaning it out, in an economic sense, if you allow the dead businesses, the zombie banks, the zombie businesses that are not profitable, if you allow them to stay in business by artificially lowering interest rates, you create a lot of brush on the forest floor, which makes the inevitable fire that much more intense. Fire. And so if you make attempts to upend the rule of law on purpose to protect your cronies who may or may not have started entire pandemics or who knows what else, then unfortunately you are inviting violence into a country that was once ruled by law. Now, Habol Aramis Kanaim Pogimbo, what is the precedent for that in the Bible? It's from the book of Numbers. We're going to go into it right now. Numbers 25, verse 6. והנה איש מבני ישראל בא ויקרב אליך ואת המדיינית לעיני משה ולעיני כל עדת בני ישראל, והם הבולכים פתח אוהל מועד. Just then a certain Israelite man came and brought a Midianite woman over to his companions in the sight of Moses and of the whole Israelite community who were weeping at the entrance of the tent of meeting. Vayar Phinehas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen, vayakom mitoch ha'ida v'yikach romach biyado. When Phinehas, or Phinehas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron, the high priest, saw this, he left the assembly, and taking a spear in his hand, vayavo achar ish Yisrael el kuba, vayidkor et shnehem et ish Yisrael v'et isha el kovatav v'teatzar magafal me'al bnei Yisrael. He followed the Israelite man into the chamber and stabbed both of them, the Israelite man and the woman, through the belly. Then the plague against the Israelites was checked. And so under these circumstances, there is no need for a trial. There's no expectation of a trial. If there is public fornication in front of 10 witnesses, then the zealots of the community can go and execute justice themselves in a vigilante way. This video was brought to you by my Patreon, where I do give these sorts of biblical lessons for as little as $3 a month. Link in the description below. I'd very much appreciate your support. And if you're one of the spiritual people, I'm sure you will enjoy the lessons that I teach there, and you might learn some biblical Hebrew as well.